Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Wednesday talk brought to you by Room to Grow, Sambi and Straight Nature. These are our monthly talks that we host. And firstly, just like to thank some of our sponsors. Firstly, Straight Nature. Straight Nature is the leading specialist natural history publisher in Southern Africa and is associated with the best-selling and most highly regarded field guides in the region. Straight Nature publishes full-color illustrated books across a variety of subject areas, including birds, mammals, reptiles, trees and flowers, the marine environment, as well as geology, astronomy, and general wildlife, as well as children's nature. And then Room to Grow. My name's Brett. I'm the owner of Room to Grow. We're an exterior exterior design and project management company that's been designing and installing landscapes in and around Cape Town since 2002. And we offer a complete suite of design and installation, as well as maintenance elements to our residential, commercial, and retail clients. And you can find out more about us on roomtogrow.co.za or follow us on our socials, Instagram and Facebook. Then it is my pleasure today to introduce Nikos Petrou, joining us from Greece. Nikos will present an overview of the Botswana's prolific wildlife, supported by its mixed habitats of desert, savanna, salt pan, wetlands, and the river delta. And Nikos is a wildlife photographer and is very active in nature conservation. He's written and co-authored 17 books, including Wildlife of Namibia, and has produced numerous articles on wildlife as well as environmental issues. There will be questions afterwards, so if we can put those into the Q&A box during the talk, we'll make sure we get to those after the talk. And with that, Nikos, over to you. Looking forward to this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brett, for the introduction and for the invitation. Good morning, everyone from sunny and very warm Greece. The span of this presentation will only allow me to give you a very brief glimpse of Botswana's prolific wildlife, as Brett said, and of the 550 species that are illustrated in our book. This book was a joint effort with my dear friend Neil MacLeod. We're co-authors. Neil is a safari guide and owner of Safari Wise in Namibia. And together we've also produced the book Wildlife of Namibia, which was published in 2019, and then again a second reprint a few months ago. Before I continue, I would like to thank Straight Nature for their trust in us and the whole team for the great cooperation we had during the production of these books. Now, Botswana's animal and plant life is very rich, and the main factor responsible for that is the country's great diversity of habitats. If we look at the physiography of the country, we recognize four entities. The first one is the lake or lacustrine system, which essentially today comprises the remnants of a huge ancient lake. This is a prehistoric lake that covered most of the northern part of the country, which gradually started drying after repeated cycles of expansion and decrease about 10,000 years ago, and presently has left behind three parts: the Mababi Depression to the east of the Okavango Delta, which is mostly dry except at its lowest point, which holds the Saputi Marsh, an important source of water in that area. There's Lake Ngami to the west and southwest of the delta, which is again shallow without an outlet and is filled with overflow from the delta. And the third part is the Makgadikgadi pans. These are the world's largest complex of salt flats and pans. And most of the time, there's no standing water in the pans, as you see here. It's just dried areas. But in years of good rains, when the overflow from the delta goes into the pans, they're transformed into saline lakes, which attract huge numbers of migrating birds, as well as herbivores from the surrounding grasslands. And the birds include the largest population of the lesser flamingo in southern Africa, with 80,000 pairs recorded in 2000 at Suapan. The second element is the river or alluvial system, which comprises mostly of the Okavango Delta. And you can see here how the overflow of the Okavango at its southeastern part flows into the Pans area through the Boteti River. And it also includes the river valley flows of some of the bigger rivers, which are the Chobe, Lindiani to the north, and the Limpopo along the southern border with South Africa. The delta, which has an area of about 17,000 square kilometers, is a mix of lagoons with open water, as we see here, floodplains, reed beds and papyrus beds, and channels, and it supports prolific wildlife. About half of it is permanent swamp, and then the remainder 50% floods according to the availability of rain and the flow of water from the river, as the Okavango brings down water from its sources up in the Angolan mountains. The river valleys actually make up a very small part of the country's surface area, but they're very important because they support moist evergreen forests like we see here, which is habitat for some special species like the Pell's fishing owl and the white-backed night heron. This is actually a nocturnal bird and usually roosts during the day in thick cover, so it's quite unusual to see it out in the open like this. The third part is the Hardveld, which consists of undulating plains with rocky hill ranges, mostly made of sandstone, basalt, and granite. The terrain is especially rugged. In the easternmost part, this area that you see here, which is called the Tuli Block, and this is an area where quite a few species reach their westernmost edge of their distribution coming in from the east side, such as the yellow-spotted rock hyrax. And I should mention here that most of the photographs that you see are all mine, with the exception of those that are indicated otherwise, as here this is Neil's picture. In the Hardveld, there are quite a few inselbergs, such as the Tswapong Hills. Those are billion-year-old hills, which host the largest breeding colony of Cape vultures in Botswana, as well as other species like the Veros or black eagle, and the klipspringer, which is a specialist for rocky areas. And then the remainder of the country, about 75% of its total surface area, includes the Sandveld, which is part of the huge Kalahari Basin, extending not only Botswana, but also Namibia, parts of Angola, and a little bit of northern South Africa. Here we have a very big mosaic of different kinds of woodland, with mostly thorn trees. We have savanna, dry riverbeds, pans, dunes. So this is a very mixed habitat supporting quite a great variety of species. To the west of the delta, there are also some large for Botswana hills, reaching up to about 400 meters from the surrounding lands. These are the Chodilo Hills, which are a geographical and cultural highlight of the country. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and there are signs of continuous human habitation in this area for the last 100,000 years, and also rock engravings or rock paintings, which are dated to at least 800 years ago, but possibly they may be older than that. And it's interesting to note that in addition to the animals that one would expect to see depicted by the natives of this land, there are representations of penguins and whales, which means that the San people of that area were in contact with the Atlantic coast, which is quite far away. Now, going into the species, if we look at the mammals, there are 157 mammals, of which the 80 are presented in the book. That's the number in the parentheses, as you'll see further down. And the biggest groups of those are the bats, with 39 species, the rodents, and the carnivores. Arguably, the most iconic species connected with Botswana is the African elephant. Botswana holds the largest population with about 130 to 150,000 individuals. The actual size of the elephant population and its impact on habitats, other wildlife, and also its management is a very controversial issue at the moment. And a few months ago, there was considerable friction between Botswana and first the UK and later Germany, because those European countries decided to impose bans on import of trophies. And with Botswana's president Masisi threatening to send elephants to the UK and Germany so that the people there would see what it's like to live with the elephants. Those species of rhino were hunted or poached almost to extinction by the 1990s. But after 2000 reintroduction efforts have bolstered the population of the square-lipped or white rhinoceros and have reintroduced the hook-lipped or black rhino to some parts of the Okavango Delta, but numbers are still very small. And there's been considerable increase in rhino poaching in the last few years. And as a result, the government has moved some of the animals to secure fenced areas and also has dehorned some of the wild population in an effort to protect the animals. Regarding the remaining big five, the African buffalo is quite common in the Okavango Delta and the floodplains of the big rivers, the Chobe up in the north. Leopard is common throughout the country. And of course, the lion. We should look at what is happening with the large carnivore species. For example, in the beginning of the 1900s, the population of lion was estimated at about 200,000 individuals, and today it's down to a tenth of that, and its range has been reduced by almost 95% from historic times. And there are populations greater than 1,000 individuals now only in 6 countries, of which Botswana is one. And the same applies to other predators as well, such as the cheetah. Again, in the early 1900s, population was about 100,000. It's down today to less than 7,000, huge reduction. And again, the range is reduced by 91%. The 70% of that population exists in only 6 countries, of which Botswana is one. Botswana also holds one of the largest populations, remaining populations of wild dog in Africa. Similar situation here, only the decline is far more dramatic because from almost 500,000 animals in the early 1900s, the population now is to about 6,500, and this is a huge decline, almost 99%, and of course a huge range reduction. And presently, it's estimated that only about 1,400 adults remain in 39 subpopulations, which are mostly disconnected from each other. And Botswana is also a stronghold for this species. And so it's not to think that this decline is only affects the predators. It's also happened for some of the larger herbivores. We see here a southern giraffe in the Chobe National Park, feeding on a woolly caper bush, one of their favorites when it's flowering. Again, we have a reduction in the last 40 years of about 50%, with a consecutive huge loss of range, and some of the subspecies or species of giraffe actually being considered, especially the northern ones, considered critically endangered. Now, Botswana is also home to some species that have restricted ranges, like, of course, hippopotamus, which is present only in aquatic habitats, but also some species that reach their southernmost or westernmost limit of their distributions in the country, such as lechwe, red lechwe. The puku, which has only one population in the whole of Southern Africa, a tiny population which is found in the Chobe floodplain. And I must say that this has been one of the hardest species for me to photograph, because I've seen it quite a few times, at always at great distances, and the opportunity to get good shots only came just a couple of months before publishing the book. I was very grateful for that animal, that male that approached us. The same goes for the two antelopes, the sable and the roan. And regarding the plains animals, the large grasslands around the Makgadikgadi National Park support a large migration, the largest migratory movement in Southern Africa. Approximately 1,300 plains zebras, or formerly Burchell zebras, and 3,000 wildebeest move between the western and the eastern part of the park, according to the availability of water and grazing. And of course, we must mention some of the iconic animals of the Kalahari, such as the honey badger, which we see here in company with the pale chanting goshawk, which is patiently waiting to grab prey as it escapes or tries to escape the digging honey badger. This is an association that has been well documented and presented from the Kalahari. And of course, the meerkat, which is symbolic, should say, of the Kalahari. If we look at the birds, there are 588 species, of which 415 are year-round residents, and the other are mostly migrants. The kori bustard is the national bird of Botswana. Botswana does not have endemic species, but it holds important populations of some species, such as the slate egret, with 85% of its global population in the Okavango Delta. The delta is also very important for the wattle crane, supporting the largest single population in the world, which accounts for about 10% of the global population, as well as the African skimmer, with about 10% of the global population. And in Botswana, the Okavango Delta and the Chobe National Park have the richest bird fauna, with 464 and 433 species respectively. And the delta is also important because it shares with the Caprivi strip in Namibia the only population of the Chipix cisticula in Southern Africa. There are also some species that do not extend their range further south and west. Among them is the collared palm thrush, which is commonly seen along the Kasane waterfront. It's very easy to find it in the gardens of the lodges there. And in the same area, one can find the beautiful Shallows turaco, but this is more difficult to see because it's a bird of the high canopy, so it takes quite a bit of searching to locate it sometimes. And similar species that do not extend their range southwards or westwards are the tropical boo-boo, this beautiful little kestrel, the Dickinson's kestrel, the lesser jacana, which is again another species that may be difficult to spot as it's very small and usually hidden in the reeds and grass. Bradfield's hornbill, very common in the Chobe National Park. Brett's helmet shrike, a bird that moves a lot and may be difficult to find in the canopy. Hartlaub's bubbler, distinguished by its white upper tail area. And this is a mocking cliffchat, which is found in the western part of the country, especially in the Tuli block. There are some species of conservation concern in Botswana, which mainly the vulture species, such as the white-headed vulture that we see here, the hooded vulture, and of course the white-headed vulture. All three species have declined sharply in recent decades, and at this time they're all three designated by IUCN as critically endangered, and they're the target of special conservation measures. Poisoning and habitat loss are the main causes behind the vulture decline. Other species of conservation concern are the battle-eared eagle, another emblematic species of the Kalahari, very frequent in the Kalahari Transfrontier Park. The martial eagle, huge, powerful bird that can take prey up to small antelope. And the kori bustard, as I said, the national bird of Botswana. And also the ground hornbill, a species that has also significantly declined and is now restricted mostly to national parks. It's not easy to find anywhere else. And of course, there are the emblematic species of Africa, like the African fish eagle, with its distinctive call, a symbol of the wetlands. The yellow-billed stork, the ostrich, seen here taking a dust bath. Other species such as the African openbill, here with a mussel and its especially adapted beak. The secretary bird, a predator of the open plains and the grasslands. And of course, quite a large variety of birds, from herons and lapwings, thick-knees, sungrouse, four species of sungrouse, sparrowfowl and francolins, rails and crakes, doves and pigeons, owls and owlets. And of course, the most colorful birds of all, the kingfishers and the bee-eaters. Some of them associated specifically with water, such as the malachite and the pied kingfisher. Some others, like the woodland, the striped, and others more tied to drier environments. And also a great variety of barbets, swallows and martins, thrushes and chats, batises, shrikes of different kinds. This is a beautiful orange-breasted bush shrike, flycatchers, starlings, sunbirds, and then of course the weavers, quite a few species, especially in the north, and finches, canaries, buntings, and quite a good representation of all the groups and families of birds in Botswana. Other wildlife, of course, includes the reptiles with 131 species, of which 63 are lizards, 58 are snakes, and there are 5 tortoises and 5 terrapins. The Nile crocodile, as Johan Marais was actually saying in his presentation last month, is a declining species. It's estimated that the population in the Okavango has declined significantly in the last 80 years. And this is attributed mostly to harvesting of adults and eggs, increased disturbance by boats, conflicts with humans, habitat loss, and to some degree pollution. And as the crocodile is a keystone species that ensures ecosystem integrity, it's possible that its decline in the Okavango Delta in the Chobe River system may have far-reaching effects. We have the monitors, the white-throated or rock monitor, quite big lizards, if one might call them lizards, and the Nile or water monitor, very commonly seen around the Chobe River, looking to raid the nests in the breeding season of ground nesting birds. Among the tortoises, this is Speke's hinged tortoise. You can see on the plastron the break that gives the appearance is the hinge. Marsh terrapin, quite common in wet habitats. And of course, among the snakes, there are 22 non-venomous species, 7 that can inflict painful bites, and 9 that are potentially deadly, including the path adder, which has a strong cytotoxic venom, the common shield cobra, which has neurotoxic venom, the black mamba, which again also has a neurotoxic venom, and the boomslang. And among the lizards, there's the Kalahari tree skink, which is quite common in the southwestern part of the country. This beautiful skink, the rainbow of 5 light lined skink. This is juvenile and distinguished by its bright blue tail. It's found only in the easternmost part of the country, especially the Tule block. And this tiny gecko is the Chodilo thick-toed gecko. It's one of the two endemic species in the country. It's restricted to the Chodilo Hills area, usually found among the rocks in the crevices, but it can also easily be seen on the buildings at the campsite. And then looking at the invertebrates, the exact number here is unknown. We present 28 species in the book. The better known family, most studied, are the Odonata, the dragonflies and damselflies, but there are also over 250 butterflies, 750 moths, about 150 grasshoppers, 450 beetle species, 300 spiders, and 25 scorpions. And of course, the numbers are expected to grow as research and exploration continues in the country and more data is gathered. And the butterflies are probably the most attractive and most familiar group to visitors, with a lot of them flying throughout the year, but some of them restricted only in the rainy season. Among the beetles, we must mention the dung beetles, as we see here, the green dung beetle. They play a very important role because they bury and consume dung. So they help in nutrient recycling, in soil structure, soil composition, improving grassland quality, and also aiding in seed dispersal. Among the grasshoppers, we've selected this beautiful specimen, the elegant grasshopper. The armored ground cricket is another species that is seen after rain. A lot of the insects, as well as the reptiles, are not easy to find in the dry season, and as this happens to be a period where most of the tourists visit the country, some of these species may not be very easy to see, especially if we consider that there hasn't been much rain in Botswana in the last few years. And this is also another species that spends the adult phase, spends most of its time underground in the burrows, and comes out in large numbers after rains, a giant velvet mite, the world's largest mite. And among the scorpions, the granulated thick-tailed scorpion is the most venomous species in Southern Africa, and it's estimated to cause a few deaths every year. Finally, the flora of Botswana is probably one of the less studied floras in Southern Africa. There's no extensive or comprehensive checklist of the plants. To date, there are 3,200 species recorded, belonging to 911 genera and 182 families. There are 440 trees and woody species and 13 endemic species. Here I must point out the papyrus, which forms extensive stands and beds in the Okavango Delta. Some of the iconic trees like the Zambezi teak, which dominates tree savanna to the west of the Okavango Delta to the border with Zimbabwe, and is a key species of at least two of the ecoregions occurring in that area. The Zambezi teak acacia woodlands and the Zambesian woodland ecoregion. The kiat, with its very distinctive wing pods. The majestic baobab, whose rather soft wood is a favorite food for the elephants, which very often demolish the trees. The jackalberry, it's a very large tree found along the waterways. Its fruit are edible and they attract a lot of birds. And of course, the mopani, which characterizes some types of woodland with its very distinctive two-lobed leaves. Makalani palm is quite common in the Makgadikgadi National Park area, but also other parts of the country. Kalahari apple leaf is a species that's very typical in the southwestern part of the country, distinguished by its very large leaves. And the sausage tree, aptly named for its very long and large pods, which are a food source for a large number of animals when they fall to the ground, and birds, as well as this mayor's parrot that we see here feeding on a pod. There are over 20 species of thorn trees in Botswana, such as this majestic camel thorn, and also the knob thorn with its very distinctive knobs or spikes on its stems and branches. The monkey orange trees are 4, possibly 5 species in Botswana, and their fruit are a favorite delicacy of the locals, especially the San people. There are some species, like the animals and birds, that reach their westernmost limit of the distribution in the eastern part of the country, especially the Tule Block area, like the sesame bush we see here, a spiny succulent small tree, and this euphorbia, the candelabra tree. And of course, quite a variety of flowers, like the candelabra flower that we have here, and quite a lot more. But unfortunately, most of them are dependent on rain, so they're easier to see or can only be seen in the wet season. And coming more or less to the end of our presentation, I would like to say a few things about nature conservation and the issues in Botswana. There has been an increase in elephant poaching. There was a spike in 2017 and 2018 with a few hundred elephants, probably close to over 350 animals estimated at having been killed at that time. There has been another spike recently with about 60 trunks confiscated as poachers were arrested at the beginning of this year. And there's actually quite a concern about what is happening with the elephants, as it seems to be poaching gangs from Zambia that are crossing through the Caprivi Strip into Botswana. In most of the cases, the kills have been in the Okavango area, but also in the Chobe National Park. And there is also debate in Botswana about some decisions of the government, such as the disarming of the anti-poaching units in 2018. And as I mentioned before, there has been an increase in rhino poaching lately. One of the main causes of concern in Botswana is land degradation, especially with the growing human population, unregulated grazing, bushfires, which are quite common, wind erosion, and tree cutting for fuel wood collection. And there is also concern about mining activities, especially recently. There's a Canadian oil company, Recon Africa, which has acquired rights for exploration and oil extraction in eastern Botswana and the eastern Namibia and western Botswana, and corner where those countries meet, and this is an area that not only would affect the watershed of the Okavango Delta, but also the migration of animals, especially the elephants, which are at the moment moving between Namibia, Botswana, and Angola. And this is something that the Casa Transfrontier Park is trying to encourage. And there have been recently quite a few complaints and even court cases in Namibia about the company disregarding the environmental terms that have been imposed, operating in areas without license, illegal drilling and opening of roads. So this is quite a bit unsettling and concerning for possible environmental impact in that area. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and we can have questions if there are any.
Thank you, Nikos. What a trip across a fantastic and obviously very diverse environment. Just as we wait for questions to come in, there are a few questions coming. We'll wait for a couple more to come in our Q&A box. I was just thinking, you finished off with sort of some of the challenges with regards to conservation in Botswana. Could you tell us about some of the successful initiatives and how these have impacted the local wildlife populations, or anything of that we could note or that's worth bringing to our attention?
Well, one of the things is certainly the reintroduction of the rhinos. As I said, they were almost hunted or poached out to extinction in the 1990s. And it's quite important that they are now found both in the wild, although we're not sure if that will remain so with the increased poaching, but also in quite a few of the private game farms. So this is encouraging. Another thing is the protection of the Cape vulture colonies and the Tuapong Hills, although there has been quite a bit of fluctuation in the area, but that's within normal ranges, because there's a recent study that shows that there has been not much change in actual population and nesting pair numbers in the last 30 some years. So this is quite encouraging for a species that is sensitive.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Marguerite's asked us here, she says she's an amateur birder, and you mentioned that there are no endemic birds in Botswana. The national bird is the Kori bustard. Is it endemic or just mostly found in Botswana?
No, it's the Kori bustard is found throughout Southern Africa. So that's just selected because it has also cultural significance in Botswana. It's one of the birds associated with tribal rights, and so I think that's why it was selected as a national bird. There's also another species, the short-toed lark, short-clawed lark, sorry, which has almost 90% of its global population in Botswana, but that's only found in a very small area to the south around Gaborone, Lobatse. It's a very, very restricted species, so one would have to go there to find it. It's not commonly seen in the country.
Colette has asked, which species are the most challenging for you to photograph?
That's a difficult question. As I said, the cuckoo has been a particular challenge, but I think this is mostly luck. It also depends. Sometimes it's the species that are connected with rainfall. So in that respect, I must say that I've been particularly unlucky. Even my visits to the Botswana in the rainy season have not seen any rain. So, some of the inter-African migrants, such as the cuckoos, that are not very easily seen unless there is insect life and availability of prey. So, yeah, it's been a challenge with those birds that are mostly connected, the migrants essentially. And then there are species where you need a very good guide, such as the Pell's fishing owl, for example. Although in most of the lodges, the local guides know where those birds are, so they increase your chances of finding them.
Sure. Good. Francis has asked you, the sausage tree, he's read that the seeds are edible. roasted. If
Mhm.
you can get them, would you risk it?
Why not? I mean, the locals are eating them. So
Okay, fair enough. Asked and answered. There you go. So if we can get hold of those roasted sausage tree seeds.
seeds.
Barbara has asked you, are you able to tell us a bit more about the game reserves and the farms in Botswana and possibly when the best time to visit would be?
Sure. Well, it depends on, of course, one's interest. I guess uh, the dry season is probably best because then water, wherever it is, attracts larger numbers of birds. So obviously, for someone who wants, or animals, someone who wants to see big populations and all that, the dry season is the best part because otherwise animals can find water everywhere and they disperse, and sometimes they're deep in the bush and not so easy to see. That said, obviously the wet season has its own species that the migrants, and some of them are very interesting species, very colorful species, but that you would miss completely. And also it's a breeding period, then you get especially the birds in breeding plumage, which are quite different than what you would get in the dry season. As for the parks, obviously the Okavango Delta has quite a few spots there. The Chobe National Park combines both the wet habitats along the Chobe floodplain and the riverfront and inland where you have the dry habitat. So I think for someone with maybe little time, whatever, that would be a good choice to visit because it would give opportunities to see quite a few animals from different habitats. Central Kalahari is very interesting, but again, there, if you go in the dry seasons, the pans are mostly empty and dry and dusty, and I think the attraction there would be the meerkats. The Kalahari Transfrontier Park is quite an interesting area to go. It has populations of all the large predators, so you can see lion and cheetah and wild dog and both species of hyenas. So that's a good place to go. It's very good for some of the raptors, such as the battleair and the marshall eagle, and then of course all the dryland and dryland species of animals and birds.
And any specific farm places that are renowned for their bird watching in particular, or is that against time of year and depending what you're looking for?
I think, yeah, it is dependent, but I would say, let's say the Shakawi area, for example, which is along the main channel of the Okavango before it enters the delta proper, is quite good, for example, for the Pell's fishing owl and the white-backed night heron. So someone is targeting species, and there are quite a few floodplains there that are good for lesser jacana. So it depends on one's interests.
And I'm sure that
mostly, I would think.
Do some research and you can find out where these would be.
Yeah, there are great places all over Botswana. So the Tuli block is a very interesting area because it's different. It's a very rugged landscape with rocky ridges and boulders and the hills and quite different vegetation with the baobab predominating and some species that you certainly do not find further west. So that can also be a good choice, especially for someone who's seen the common, let's say, or the usual, not say common, but the usual things, and wants to get into something more different. So that would be a good place to go.
Great, thank you. Andrea's asked us here, how safe are the wild camps from the point of view of animals?
Well, with reasonable caution, I would say they're very safe. We've camped wild of course, you can only camp in the wild with guides. You can't do it on your own. So you have to go with registered Botswana operators. So we've camped wild quite a few times in the Okavango. And you do get, I mean, we've had wild dog actually running through the camp, and we've had elephant come and feed above one of the tents, hyenas spoor throughout the camp, and even lion sign that had come to spend the night next to where we lit the fire the previous evening. And you can hear the hyenas sometimes coming to drink the water from the wash basins, but we've never had an incident. And if you exercise reasonable caution, don't wander out at night on your own, and heed the advice of the guides, I think it's fairly safe.
Great, good. Ian is firstly, thank you, brilliant, thanks so much, Nikos, and then has asked, why were the rangers disarmed?
Well, there's a big controversy. The official explanation on that was that only the armed forces can bear arms. So for some reason, the government distinguishes between the rangers, anti-poaching units, and the armed forces. And actually, at the moment, it's the army that's patrolling, and the Chobe, for example, boat patrols and all that. There is quite a bit of controversy regarding, especially elephant management, mainly from, let's say, on the one side, the conservationist groups or side, and on the other side, the hunting industry and the local people that obviously suffer damage from the large number of elephants. So there was a ban on hunting by the previous president, which was that was effected in I think 2014, and then in 2018 or 2019 the ban was lifted because the thinking is that the elephant population is too large and that something needs to be done. Now there are obviously one needs to make up one's mind on that, because one side, the hunting side, says that the hunters take only a very small number of animals, and it's the largest animals, and the money from the revenue from hunting goes to the local people, improves the situation there. On the other hand, you get the conservation groups that say that's actually not the case, because the money mostly goes to the big companies, and a very small part of that trickles down actually to the local people, and only those that are hired in the companies and all that. And that by taking out the older and stronger and biggest animals, you actually affect the gene pool, because you remove the strong genes from the pool for the population. So it's quite a heated debate, and it's become political as well. It's not just a conservation issue. So it's a very complex issue. It's not easy to take a side, especially when one is not living there. There's a good point to that, but it is saddening, and it's that the poaching is on the increase, and we see that also in Namibia in the last few years, where there have been very, very few cases of poaching, and now we've got hundreds of cases of rhino poaching and elephant poaching. So it's becoming difficult, and I think any means that would help crack down on that would help.
Sure. Angus has asked a question. I'm just we have to just I think negotiate a little bit. Are there shoebills in this area? Now I know there were shoebills. No,
it wasn't shoebill. Shoebill is further north in Zambia.
Okay,
yeah,
so pass it on. No shoebills in
shoebills.
Botswana. No. There we go. And then I wanted to, you mentioned about the rains. Is this part of a normal sort of dry cycle? Is this something that Botswana sees on a regular thing? Is it something unprecedented? You say you've been there in the rainy season and it hasn't actually had rain. Is this part of a normal up and down cycle, or is this out of the ordinary?
No, there is usually it's been described as a 7-year cycle of drought and rain. There was good rain in 2020. When actually was supposed to go, but couldn't because of the COVID restrictions. So it was a big sad moment in my preparation of this book. Actually, the book was supposed to come out in 2020, but then we got stuck in all that story. But for the last 3 years after 2020, there hasn't been any rain. So, and it actually affects the everything. It affects the flora, it affects the animals quite a lot. Of course, as I said, you don't see the migration of the birds, but also it affects even livestock. It's not just the wild animals. So this can become a critical issue. And sometimes in the previous drought cycle in Namibia, they were sending actually animals to other countries, trying to reduce the number. And actually, this has happened with elephants. In Botswana, the government has sent some elephants to Angola, I think about maybe 20,000 animals, and some to Mozambique as well, trying to reduce the numbers without killing the animals.
To reduce the pressure on the resource.
To reduce the pressure. Yes, the Chobe has changed considerably. First time I went there was back in late 90s, and then seeing it now, 30 or 25 years later, it's quite different. Most of the large trees have gone, and you can see that there is an impact, and the impact is not only on the bigger trees and the vegetation, but it's also on other animals as well, because some of the antelope species, like the kudu, for example, have a much smaller wandering range than the elephants, because the elephants can forage or go around for water for tens of kilometers, sometimes even up to 50 kilometers a day. So they affect the vegetation in that area, but some of the other animals cannot go that far in the day. So, you know, the range of movement is much smaller. So their habitat is affected a lot, and so they have to move out of that area. So those are very complex interactions in the habitats.
It's easy sitting back saying, take care and look after the animals. But if you've only got a limited amount of land to do that with, how do you manage the resources correctly? And yeah, I suppose no easy answer to this
Very
conservation
difficult.
question.
Very
Very difficult question. It looks like we've come to the end of our questions, Nikos. I want to thank you so very, very much for sharing your time, your expertise, your passion, your knowledge, your beautiful photographs with us. We would love to have you back again if the opportunity allows.
Well, maybe we can do something on Namibia.
That would be fantastic. We would love to have you back.
Thank
you to everybody for joining us for this talk. Again, the talk has been recorded and will be made available to you once that is live, the recording. You've got the special offer there on the screen for the book from the Kirstenbosch and from Sandy. Please take advantage of that. And then we look forward to seeing you all in a month's time, the first Wednesday of August. And we'll see you all again then. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nikos. Thanks, Belinda. We'll see you again.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.